She pulled me into her room and said, "I know exactly what I'm doing." Asterisk, her fingers curled around my wrist, not desperate, not hesitant, just certain, like she'd already made peace with whatever came next. Asterisk, the hallway was dim, walls aged with soft shadows, and her bare feet made no sound on the wooden floor. I could hear the rain tapping lightly on the roof. Something inside me shifted, something that had been still for too long. Asterisk, I didn't speak. I didn't know what to say. Asterisk, earlier that day, I hadn't expected to even see her there to fix the porch light, a simple favor for a neighbor. Asterisk, I'd been staying in the guest house behind my aunt's property for the summer. Somewhere quiet after everything burned out back home. After the job that drained me. After a relationship that ended with a text message and a silence I didn't argue with. I didn't come here looking for anything. It's just space to breathe. Asterisk, she lived in the old blue house next door with its crooked shutters and soft jasmine trailing up the side. I'd seen her a few times watering plants in the early morning, standing at the edge of her porch like she was waiting for someone who never arrived. I always said hello. She always nodded, like we shared some silent agreement that neither of us would ask too much. Asterisk, that afternoon, I'd offered to fix the flickering light. She said yes, with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I noticed her hands were rougher than I'd expected, fingertips calloused, nails trimmed close. She handed me the screwdriver like she knew how to use it better than I did. Asterisk, used to fix everything myself, she said. But some things are nicer when someone else does them. Asterisk, it should have been a throwaway line, but it settled in my chest like something heavier. Asterisk, we didn't talk much after that. I worked. She brought me a glass of cold water without asking. I drank it standing on her porch, while the sky shifted from afternoon gold to pale blue. When the job was done, I told her. Asterisk, she paused, then nodded again. Thank you. Really. Asterisk, then, just as I turned to leave, she said, wait. Asterisk, there was a strange urgency in her voice. Not panic, more like clarity, like she'd been sitting on the edge of a thought for weeks, and it had finally slipped out. Asterisk, she stepped aside, held the door open a little wider, glanced in. The hallway was warm, the light soft. Her scent drifted past me, lavender, something clean and old, like linen. That had seen years of summers. Asterisk, you don't have to, she said. But if you want, I made tea. Asterisk, maybe it was the way she stood there, not inviting, not demanding. Maybe it was the quiet in me that had gone too long unanswered. I said yes. Asterisk. She led me inside. Her house felt lived in, but not cluttered. Books on shelves, one cracked window she hadn't gotten around to fixing, a lamp with a yellow bulb that made everything feel like a memory. Asterisk, we sat across from each other at the kitchen table. The tea was chamomile. Neither of us drank much of it. The air between us started to feel like something unspoken was pressing against it, begging to be noticed. Asterisk, I don't usually do this, she said softly, like she wasn't even sure what this was. Her voice had a quiet rasp to it, like she'd smoked once in her life, but hadn't for a long time. I watched her fingers circle the rim of her mug. Asterisk, I wanted to ask, do what? But I already knew the answer wasn't about actions, it was about letting someone in. And maybe about wanting to be seen without armor for a few minutes. Asterisk, I'm not what you're used to, she said after a while, not looking up. Asterisk, I shrugged. Neither am I. She smiled at that, small, unsure, but real. We didn't say much more. I told her I'd head out, and she stood slowly. Walked me to the hallway like she didn't know whether she hoped I'd leave or stay. Asterisk, then, just as I reached the door, she reached for my hand. Fingers around my wrist. Gentle, steady. Asterisk, she pulled me into her room and said, I know exactly what I'm doing. Asterisk, it wasn't seduction. It wasn't a game. It felt like she was giving herself permission for the first time in years. The room was dark but not cold. A candle flickered near the window. Books lined one wall. Her bed was unmade, as if she'd left it in a hurry or never really cared to make it in the first place. There was a chair in the corner with a cardigan draped over the arm. Smelled like her. Asterisk. She didn't touch me again. Just let go of my wrist and walked a few steps forward, pausing near the bed, her back to me. The silence between us stretched. Asterisk. I don't want you to misunderstand, she said quietly. I don't need anything. But who doesn't ask me to explain myself? I nodded before I even realized I had, and then she sat down on the edge of the bed, looked at me and said nothing more. Asterisk. I didn't move closer. I didn't leave either. Asterisk. There, in the stillness, something settled between us. Not desire, not even comfort. Just the feeling of two people slowly learning how to be present again. Asterisk. I stood near the door, unsure what to say. I could still feel the weight of her hand around my wrist, warm, deliberate. Asterisk. Outside, the rain started again, soft and steady. It painted shadows on her window. Asterisk. We didn't touch. We didn't kiss. But when I finally turned to go, she said, "You can come back. Tomorrow, if you want." I said I would, and I meant it. Asterisk. The next morning, found myself drifting back to her house without even thinking about it. Asterisk. The sky was overcast, a thin mist rising from the lawn. Her porch still creaked in the same places, and the air smelled faintly of wet earth and old wood. She was out front when I arrived, crouched low near the garden bed, tugging weeds with her bare hands. "Morning," I said. She glanced up, sunlight catching the lines beneath her eyes. She looked tired but calm. "You really came back," she said. "You asked me to?" Asterisk. She smiled, small, quiet. "Didn't think you would." Asterisk. I didn't either. Asterisk. That became our rhythm. I'd show up late mornings, sometimes early afternoons. I pretended to check on the porch light again, though it didn't need fixing. Other times, I'd help her carry things down from the attic, or untangle an old wind chime from a branch. Asterisk. She never asked me to stay, never asked why I kept coming. But the tea would already be brewing by the time I stepped inside. Asterisk. I learned the rhythms of her house, the soft whir of the ceiling fan in the kitchen, the way one of the floorboards near the hallway always let out a breath when stepped on, the faint ticking of a clock that didn't tell the right time but still kept going. Asterisk. We didn't talk much at first, but when we did, it was in half-finished thoughts and soft, unpolished truths. Asterisk. My husband used to say the garden was the only place I smiled without pretending. She told me one day, her voice half lost in the breeze. Asterisk. I didn't ask about him. She didn't offer more. She let the silence stretch after that, and I let it stay. Asterisk. She wore the same cardigan most days worn, ash blue one with fraying sleeves. Grew familiar with the shape of her in it, how it hung a little loose at the shoulders, how she'd tug at the cuffs when she was thinking. Asterisk. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at me just for a second to long and then she'd glance away, like the moment had slipped from her grip before she could name it. Asterisk. There were things she didn't say. I could feel them in the way she moved, in the way she'd stand at the kitchen sink, hands in the warm water long after the last dish had been rinsed, in the way she'd sit on the porch some evenings, staring out at the road like she was waiting for a version of her life that never arrived. Asterisk. I didn't ask for more than she gave. I think that's why she kept giving. Asterisk. One afternoon I found her trying to fix the hinges on a screen door that hadn't closed properly in years. I offered to help. She hesitated, then stepped aside. "You don't have to," she said. "I know." Asterisk. Her hands brushed against mine when she passed me the screwdriver. It was barely a touch, but it stayed with me longer than it should. Worked in silence, the kind that feels like music when it's with the right person. I could hear birds somewhere in the distance. Her breath was slow, steady. Asterisk. Sometimes I think I forget how to let people in, she said suddenly. I've built so many walls, I don't know what to do when someone just walks through them. Asterisk. Tightened the last screw and turned toward her. Asterisk. Then don't do anything, I said. You don't have to. Asterisk. She looked at me like she wasn't sure whether to believe that. But she didn't look away. That night, I stayed later than usual. We sat on the porch with 2 chipped mugs of coffee. The air smelled like wet leaves. A faint breeze rustled through the trees. I told her about the city I'd left behind, about the job that drained the color from my days, about the way everything there felt loud and artificial. She didn't interrupt. She just listened, eyes half lowered, as if the sound of my voice was something she needed more than the words themselves. Asterisk, you don't talk like most people your age, she said at one point. Asterisk, you don't talk like someone who gave up. Asterisk, she didn't answer. But her mouth curved into something that almost resembled hope. Asterisk. It was getting late when I finally stood to leave. Asterisk, she walked me to the door, barefoot, cardigan pulled tight around her. The porch light flickered on above us, casting a soft golden hue across her face. Asterisk. Thanks for today, she said. I didn't realize I needed the company. Asterisk, I nodded. Neither did I. Asterisk. There was a pause longer than usual. Her hand reached out, fingers grazing my forearm, light as breath. Wasn't intentional. Or maybe it was. Either way. She didn't pull back right away. Our eyes met in that space between night and goodbye. She didn't move closer. I didn't either. But in that brief touch, just skin on skin, a moment held like a fragile note in the air. Something shifted again. Asterisk, not a beginning. It's not yet, but something unmistakable. The storm came without warning. Asterisk, I heard the first roll of thunder around dusk, low and distant. By the time I crossed the short stretch of grass between our houses, the sky had darkened to a bruised purple, and the wind was tugging at the trees, like it was looking for something to take. Asterisk, I didn't knock. She always told me I didn't have to. Asterisk, she was in the kitchen, barefoot again, sleeves rolled to her elbows, slicing carrots on a wooden board. There was something soft playing on the radio, a woman's voice low and melancholy.
Howdy.
The scent of garlic and rosemary filled the air. Asterisk, she looked up, smiled without surprise. You came early. Asterisk, I stepped in, wiped rain from my shoulders. Storm pushed me in. Asterisk, she laughed quietly. Then I guess I should feed you before the power goes. Out. Asterisk, dinner was simple. Pasta, roasted vegetables, 2 glasses of red wine she kept from an old birthday. We sat across from each other at her kitchen table, candlelight flickering as the storm grew louder outside. Asterisk, rain hammered the windows. The lights blinked once, then steadied. Asterisk, she poured the last of the wine between us and leaned back in her chair, legs tucked underneath her like a girl who had long since forgotten how to be carefree. Asterisk, I got married when I was 24.
House.
She said suddenly. Too young? Too sure? Asterisk. I didn't respond, just let her speak. Asterisk, he was older, confident, the kind of man who filled a room without asking permission. I thought that was love, being chosen, being claimed. Asterisk, the wind howled against the siding. Inside, the quiet between us thickened. Asterisk, I thought, if I gave enough, loved hard enough, I'd become enough. But people like him, they don't want partners. They want mirrors. She stared into her glass, then set it down slowly. By the end, I didn't even recognize my own voice. I'd speak and wonder if he'd approve before I finished the sentence. And when he left, I didn't cry. I just ... exhaled. I felt her words like they were folding into my chest. Sometimes, she said, I still feel like I'm speaking through glass, like people see the shape of me but not what's inside. You don't sound invisible, I said softly. She looked up, surprised not by the words, but by the gentleness in them. Asterisk, no one's ever said that to me. Asterisk, lightning flashed, followed by a rumble that shook the floorboards. The lights went out. Asterisk, she didn't move. Neither did I. Asterisk, only the candle between us remained, casting golden shadows across her face. She looked younger in the half-light, but there was a kind of ache in her expression that no flicker could soften. Asterisk, would you sit with me? She asked. Asterisk, not come closer, not stay. Just sit. I nodded. She led me through the house, slow and wordless. Her fingers grazed mine in the dark, barely there, yet unmistakable. In her bedroom, the candlelight pooled on the dresser, throwing soft light on the photos she never mentioned. One of her in a sun hat, smiling. Another of a dog I'd never seen. We sat on the floor beside the bed, backs against the wall, knees just barely touching. She pulled the cardigan tighter around her and sighed. It's strange, isn't it? How you can live an entire life beside someone and still feel like a stranger in your own skin. I think, I said. Some people just forget how to look. She tilted her head toward me, a soft curiosity in her eyes. You look, she said. Not as a compliment, but a quiet realization, and I did. I saw the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she didn't know what to say. The way her lips pressed together when her memories got too close. The way she held herself like someone who had spent years learning to carry her own weight. Even when it hurt, she shifted slightly, her shoulder brushing mine. I felt her breath near my collar. Her voice, when it came again, was barely more than a whispered asterisk. Can I ask something? Selfish? Anything? She turned, eyes darker now in the dim light, but clear. Would you hold me? Just for a moment. Not because I'm broken, not because I need fixing, just because I'm here. I didn't speak. I just opened my arms. She leaned into me slowly, cautiously, like she was testing the shape of trust again. Her cheek against my chest, hands loosely folded near her stomach. I wrapped my arms around her with the kind of care that felt sacred. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. But I felt something inside her settle, like a long-held breath finally let go. My cheek rested against the top of her head. Her hair smelled like rain and warmth and something that reminded me of home. We stayed like that for a long time. The storm moved on. The silence between us deepened not in distance but in depth. No kiss. No rush. Just presence. When I finally opened my eyes, the candle had burned low. But her hand was still resting gently on my chest, and mine still cradled the curve of her shoulder. Nothing was said. Nothing needed to be. She pulled me into her room again the next morning. No words. Just a soft tug on my sleeve and the way her eyes didn't ask. Just trusted. Sunlight streamed in through the curtain she always forgot to close, catching dust motes dancing midair. Her bed was unmade. The candle from last night had melted into a crooked puddle on the dresser. Her hair was messy, one sleeve slipping off her shoulder. She looked like a moment unfinished, and more beautiful for it. We didn't speak much. That morning, just shared coffee, our legs touching under the table. Her hand wrapped around her mug like it was the only thing keeping her steady. I watched how her thumb circled the rim absent-mindedly, like there was something she was trying to remember but couldn't name. I kept showing up every day after that. We developed a rhythm. Slow, deliberate. She made tea while I raked the leaves. From her walkway, I fixed the old window latch she'd stopped bothering to close. We spent long afternoons on the porch, saying very little. Sometimes she'd hum under her breath. Sometimes I'd read aloud from the paper and she'd roll her eyes at the headlines. She let herself lean into me more small gestures. Resting her hand on my knee when she laughed or curling up beside me on the couch while a record played low in the background. I memorized the weight of her, the way she breathed when she was finally still, the way she let herself forget how alone she'd felt. But I also started noticing the moments when she pulled away. Those flickers in her expression when the world crept back in. One night, as I stood in her kitchen drying dishes, she watched me with that faraway look I'd come to recognize, like she was measuring something against time. You're young, she said. Not accusing, just observing. So you'll want more? Eventually something brighter, newer, less weathered. I set the plate down gently. You're not something I found by accident, I said. You're what I noticed when everything else finally went quiet. Asterisk, she didn't look at me right away. Just turned toward the window and let the silence settle. Asterisk, it's not easy to believe that. She admitted. Asterisk, I'm not asking you. To believe it all at once? Asterisk, she turned back to me slowly, eyes glassy but steady. Then what are you asking? Asterisk. To let me prove I won't disappear. Asterisk, she didn't answer. But she didn't walk away either. Asterisk, that weekend, I came over early before. She was awake. I brought a can of paint I'd found in the back of my shed. A warm, gentle shade of green, she once mentioned, reminded her of spring mornings in her childhood home. Asterisk, the front door had been chipped and peeling since the first day I met her. She said she'd stop noticing. I hadn't. Asterisk, I painted quietly, layer by layer, while the sun came up and the birds started fussing in the trees. The scent of rain still lingered in the grass. The world was hushed and new. Asterisk, she stepped outside halfway through, barefoot as always, cardigan tugged tight. Asterisk, she didn't say anything at first, just stared at the door, then at me, then back again. Asterisk, you. Remembered? She said softly. Asterisk, I shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. Thought maybe it was time. Asterisk, she walked over slowly. Her fingers grazed the drying edge of the frame, then slipped into mine. Asterisk, that color, she whispered. Hey. It looks like belonging. Asterisk, we stood there together, her hand in mine, the scent of wet earth and paint curling around us. I felt her body ease beside me, not in surrender, but in trust. A kind of quiet that said, I'm not running anymore. Winter came slowly after that. The garden froze over. Leaves fell and didn't come back. The porch creaked louder in the cold. But inside, there was always warmth simmering soup. Blankets draped over our legs, her head resting against my shoulder while the wind tapped at the windows. Asterisk, some nights she still got quiet, uncertain. I'd find her staring at old photos, her thumb brushing over the faces like she was asking their permission to move on. Asterisk, but she always came back to me. I stayed. Asterisk, we never made a declaration, never called it anything out loud. But our days began to blur together. I brought my books. She left a drawer empty for me. My toothbrush sat beside hers, unnoticed but never out of place. Asterisk, one night. The snow started falling just before dusk. Asterisk, we sat on the porch, wrapped in a shared blanket. 2 mugs of tea warming our hands. She watched the flakes drift down, her breath rising in soft puffs of white. Asterisk, I used to hate winter, she murmured. Too still, too quiet. It reminded me of everything I'd lost. Asterisk, and now? I asked. Asterisk, she looked at me, or really looked, like she was seeing not just the boy who had shown up with a broken light bulb, but the man who chose her over and over, even when she flinched. Asterisk, now, she said, it feels like beginning again. Asterisk, I reached for her hand. She didn't hesitate. Asterisk, we sat there as the snow deepened. The world around us softened and blanketed in white. Her fingers curled into mine, our mugs steaming in the cold air. No promises, you're sketched in detail. Asterisk, just 2 people who found each other when everything else had gone quiet and stayed.